Hi, I'm Dr. Markwada, and I'm hosting this chat on behalf of The Next Step. There are so many things as a graduate I wish I knew about that university just didn't prepare me for. And that's where the wonderful The Next Step comes in. I'm joined by fellow dentist Dr. James Foster and Dr. Tilly Houston, both currently working as associates, and Dr. Megan McLeod, who started her foundation training this year. Welcome, everyone. We're going to chat about the need-to-knows and the must-dos to survive and thrive financially as you enter the working world, and even the things you wish you'd known but you didn't. So let's talk finance. So potentially one of the most exciting things about starting work is obviously getting paid. Do you feel financially educated for this?
I think personally, yes, but I think that's because I've done a lot of my own research about how the different financial bits works out. I think DFT does a quite a good job of preparing you for the broad strokes, but there is some more detailed parts that you do need to take a little bit of time to figure out yourself. Biggest one, I think, being the NHS pension scheme. It's very, very confusing. And it took me 3 people telling me about it and 2 YouTube videos before I started wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, it's I remember when I got my first pay slip, there's so many different numbers on there. And I was trying to just look and work out like which one actually means how much I got paid.
Confusing,
yeah.
isn't it?
So I would just say my advice would be when you get your first pay slip, just sit down with your boss or someone who understands it and just talk you through what all the different superannuation is and everything. And then that, for me, that really helped me to understand it a bit better.
Yeah, I think for me it's important to remember that you will eventually get taxed, because it's nice at first when it's a bigger paycheck. It's like, oh, this is great, but then you need to remember down the line you will actually start getting like less because of the tax. So I think that's an important one to be aware of. It is nice to be like, oh, first paycheck, like it's nice to feel that reward after the whole 5 years of hard work.
Your first paycheck with DFT is the highest it's going to be because you've got that personal allowance saved up. And then as you use the personal allowance, your pay starts to go down. And then in April, you start paying student loans, it goes down again. Whereas self-employed, it starts off low and then carries on going up. So it's a bit different that way.
And I think something else to just bear in mind that my accountant made me aware of was when you're putting money aside for tax, I didn't realise, but you pay kind of for that tax year and then again another half for the following year. So that first year really hits you because you're paying more than you would normally, and then it kind of settles itself down. So just be prepared for that and know when it's coming out and make sure that you put enough aside each month to cover it.
Following up from that as well, actually, it's not just the tax bill you need to be aware of. You might also have a pension bill as well, because the way the NHS pension scheme is calculated is it's just done as an average. So take a certain amount off your paycheck every month, and then when it comes to April, they calculate how much you should have actually spent on the pension scheme. So they'll also send you a bill in April. So you need to put money aside for that as well. Lots of people with their hands out.
So Tilly, what would you say in terms of getting tips to become more financially prepared?
So I found looking online is a really great place to start. There's loads of resources out there. The Next Step do some fantastic videos that just shows you how to get started with things. Also just speaking to other colleagues in the practice who may be slightly older than you, just about the main things to be aware of. There's some great Facebook groups out there. YouTube's a great resource as well. So I would start online and then go to kind of colleagues and peers as well.
Brilliant, great tips there. So were there any outgoings, Megan, for you that you needed to cover before your first paycheck?
Yeah, so it's quite a difficult transition from graduating before you get your first paycheck, because you don't get paid until the end of the month. So it's things like having to pay your GDC registration initially, and then also paying rent, because quite often with a deposit they'll consider your paychecks as well. So it's quite a big sum to pay originally, and then also bills when you've moved in. So it was actually a lot more than I realised that you have to pay for, because when you finish you're just kind of in celebration mode, like you want to go and enjoy yourself, but then it's actually, we've still got a lot that we need to pay before you get paid again. So I think it's just having that awareness.
Do you have any thoughts about this?
It's a bit of a shock to the system at the start. I would definitely say to any kind of students who are in their final year, just to start putting a little bit aside, because you finish uni at the beginning of summer, we'll then go off travelling, have an amazing summer, before you start work, but you do get that GDC payment. It's kind of towards August time of a few hundred, I think it is. 300 odd.
300.
Yeah, so that you need to be aware of, and then it will be another 700 odd December that same year. So just making sure that you've budgeted for that. You obviously will start getting paid mid-October, but you just don't want to be kind of in a situation where you can't cover that.
So how about UDAs? Did you feel that you knew enough about how to get paid as an associate and what you needed to cover and how the system actually worked?
I felt like I knew a decent amount, as in beginning stages. I think any dentist who's been in the NHS long enough will tell you it's so complicated that you won't really understand it properly unless you've been working in it and making mistakes for a little while. My DFT definitely prepared me a little bit. So you had a couple of talks about it. And then you start going to look for associateships and they can tell you about the different UDA prices and targets you're looking for. Important thing to remember is that you're going to be going out into associateship and you're not going to be completing the amount of UDAs that a fully qualified dentist who's been doing it for a number of years is going to be able to do. One of the questions that I got asked every single time I went for an interview was, what would your UDA target be? And the first time it kind of caught me off guard because I'd never really thought about that before. So I just blurted out a number and they're like, yeah, sure, that's absolutely fine. But one really important thing was that every time I went for a practice interview, I made sure there was no clawback. So that's a system where some practices, if you don't fulfill your UDA targets, they might take some money away from you. And I didn't want to be in an environment like that. So I made sure every practice wouldn't be doing that.
I agree. That was something I wasn't aware of. So you can actually get penalised if you do too many UDAs or too few. So working out what's going to be a good UDA rate for you is really important, but you have no idea how many you're going to be able to do. So some advice that I was given was, if you work out how many days of the week you're going to work, if you're working on the NHS, so say you're working 4 days a week, then 4,000 UDAs a year is a good target or a rough idea to aim for that first year out, because it will be achievable without you kind of breaking your back, and you will have that little bit of time to just give you a bit of a buffer. So that was quite a good little tip that I picked up, which I don't know if you would agree.
Oh no, definitely. 1,000 UDAs per day of working was what I was told to aim for as well. Something else to be aware of as well is that quite a lot of practices, when you go for interviews there, will say, well, you know, you're fresh out of DFT, you're not going to be working quite as quick as some of the other associates, so we're going to pay you a lower UDA rate. So quite a few of my friends came to me with stories that they were going to be paid £1 or £2 less than some of the rates I've been offered. I was quite lucky, none of the practices I went to interview at did that to me, but that is something to be aware of, that you might be offered less because they're assuming you're not going to be able to work as quickly.
You can actually look online and find out what the practice UDA rate is. So that might give you a little bit of an idea, if you've got an interview beforehand, what the sort of thing might be that they offer you. So it's just maybe something good to just research before you go.
Brilliant, great tips there. So Tilly and James, are you thinking about your financial future right now, or do you think it's a bit too early to have that conversation?
So I wasn't really, if I'm honest. And then I found that it was all quite a lot as my first tax return was coming up. So I got an accountant, which has been honestly probably the biggest thing I could have done, like the best thing, because he's been so helpful in guiding me through what are the things I can claim, what I can't claim, how much money roughly I need to be putting aside. And that's just been kind of taking a bit of weight off my shoulders. We've also had some discussions about whether I want to start a pension and that side of things, which again, obviously, as it's a pension, the earlier you can start with it, then the better it's going to be later on. So yeah, I would say start thinking about it and planning as soon as you can.
No, yeah, I completely agree. The earlier you start thinking about it, the better you're going to be able to prepare for the future, and the less things are going to come down the road and bite you. But one thing people not actually realise is that as a self-employed individual, there's a lot of things you can claim back, like your mileage if you have to drive to another location, your laundry bills, any kind of professional cost, like your GDC fees, your indemnity costs. Those are things that you can claim your tax back on, which you can do yourself, but it would seem a bit too complicated for me, so I'm going to be getting an accountant to do it for me.
And how do you go about getting the right accountant? Because I know there's different types of accountants. Yeah, how did that process go?
So there are so many out there. I was recommended to get an accountant who's a specific kind of in the dental industry. So I just had a chat with a few and they seemed to know what they were talking about. So I went along with it. But I would recommend a dental specific accountant, because I found that at the end of the year, there were so many things that he'd said, oh, you can claim for this, you can claim for this. Whereas friends and colleagues who just had kind of like their family accountant wasn't kind of industry specific, knew about, oh yeah, the laundering of your scrubs and that kind of thing that you can claim for.
Yeah, just ask around your colleagues, because a lot of them will have accountants as well, and just ask around, see who has good experiences and see who you might want to go to. Important thing to know is with accountants, you don't actually pay them until you do your first set of accounts with them. So you can just go along and ask some questions and get to know them a little bit. You don't necessarily have to pay them yet until you're sure you've got the right one.
So what one thing do you wish you'd known about when you first started being a dentist in terms of the financial world?
So I think for me as a dentist, knowing when you're self-employed, how your salary fluctuates month on month, especially say when you go on holiday, when you take a couple of weeks off, not only are you not earning, but you're also spending. So it's like a double whammy. And financially that does hit, you notice it. So it's kind of budgeting for that and planning for that when you have a slightly bigger month to kind of cover you when you are away or you're ill or something like that.
That was really insightful. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat. Thanks for joining me, Tilly, James, and Megan.